Welcome to the third episode of How Are the Children, a limited series podcast show where we discuss social issues in our country through a lens that focuses on the most vulnerable, the children. In the past, we have talked about issues like food insecurity and the childcare crisis. And for all of these, there's an underlying common thread. The fact that they are issues created by systems that are failing our children, and therefore stressing out the adults stuck in between them, causing there to be tension when we should be relying and supporting on each other. For this episode, I wanted to talk about education. I went through public schools in Fort Worth, Texas, and I had personally had a great experience. And I also just finished working at a public middle school for about 3 years before I unfortunately had to make a change. One of my biggest takeaways has been that although these systems may be letting us down and broken, we must rely on each other as adults to support each other so that we're able to show up as best as possible for the children, because they are our future. My 3 years teaching taught me so much and allowed me to have so much more respect and compassion both for parents and for educators. For this conversation, I wanted to bring on Ale Checka, who was my 7th grade English teacher, and she's also been my coworker for the past 3 years. I hope you're able to get some valuable insight into what the current state of education is and how we can all support each other, education, and our children. Thank you, Ale, for joining me on this conversation where we ask and answer the question, how are the children? For the listeners, can you explain a little bit about our history and how we know each other?
Well, I am a very long time middle school teacher, and the mark of how long I've been teaching middle school is that I was your 7th grade English teacher. Yeah. So we have known each other for a very, very, very long time. I had you for 2 years.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, because the first year you were my 7th grade English teacher, and then the year after that, you were my Shakespeare class teacher.
Yeah. All Shakespeare all the time.
Yeah.
That was a great
was
year.
Awesome. Was that the only year that class happened?
Yep. But we also did, we did the Renaissance.
Yeah, the Roman history class.
Roman history. That was really fun.
And then that was like the catalyst for my obsession with all Roman history and Greek mythology also and all that.
That was actually 3 different classes because it was a semester of ancient Rome, it was a semester of the Renaissance, and then it was a full year of Shakespeare.
Oh, my God.
Indoctrinated you with everything that I have.
Yeah, and then I remember as I was graduating college, I was like, I'm thinking of going to Italy, and it was kind of like full circle. So I got to visit all the stuff that we learned about. And then these past 3 years, we've been coworkers. So we went from, you were my English teacher, to throughout high school, you were my mentor, kind of, because I was a first generation. I didn't know anything about the college process. Yeah,
I really treasure. I've been to a lot of your graduations, which is super fun.
Yeah,
was it your high school graduation? Was it your college graduation? And then when I went back to school, that's when you were applying for college yourself. And so we were in touch then, and also, because I needed some help with my own project. So we've known each other for quite a bit. Yeah.
And then the past 3 years, again, we were coworkers at the same middle school, the middle school that I attended, where I met
That's
you.
Exactly right. What's wild is that you started mid-COVID.
Oh, yes. I do remember that.
Under the most difficult possible circumstances, but you have never shied away from a challenge. So we became coworkers in the middle of COVID, and that has been wonderful.
Which was very helpful, and kind of part of what we're going to talk about on this episode about, that interdependence between veteran teachers, new teachers, the community teachers, parents, teachers, all of that, and how we can kind of support students, the children, which this podcast is about. We're going to ask and answer that question. Ale, since we both work with children every day, well, and just for y'all to know, this was my last year in the school. I just got a new job, which I'll speak about later in the episode, but we work with children every day. How are the children?
The children are amazing. I mean, the children are amazing, just to say in a sentence. It's an incredibly difficult job, and most definitely, the kids are what keep me in it.
Yeah, for sure.
And I have not been so attached to a class in a long time as I was with this class that just left. I think that they were just wonderful.
They were, they were who I started with. They were my first full year, and then, they're going off to high school. So I guess because they're leaving, I kind of left. But yeah, I agree. whenever I tell people that I'm a teacher, they're like, oh, whoa. And then I said middle school, they're like, oh, an even bigger reaction. And I get it, I guess. Middle schoolers have that bad reputation, but they're great. They're a good time. And whenever people ask, like, why did I leave? I guess they're expecting me to say that, oh, the children just kind of wore me out. But no, like, they were the best part of the job. Yep. They were kind of, why I kept going. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, what kind of caused me to leave was the adult part of it. Yeah. But yeah, no, the kids are great. So
people always want to know, like, why I'm not a principal, why did I do stuff? Like, no, the part of the job that I really enjoy is like being in my classroom with kids. They're so gross, but they're so funny.
Yeah, and they're so mean. But again, and you know what? In 1 second they're mean, or 1 second they're like, "Oh, Mr. Marquez, you do this," and the next second they're like, "Your outfit is a lot." That's a bold choice.
Yeah. Middle school, like not just K-12, but middle school, it is not for the soft.
Yeah, oh no, definitely not.
It is not for the weak, the faint-hearted, the thin-skinned.
No.
Nope. But I love it.
Yes. Okay, so Ale, can you take us kind of through your journey throughout the beginning years of your teaching career? Sure. How did you get into teaching? What kind of brought you in, and how was that process? What did you think about the career at first that you kind of were surprised about, or anything you had to unlearn?
Mm-hmm. Like a lot of secondary teachers in Texas, I'm alternatively certified. And, to say that sentence, actually, there's a lot there because I never wanted to be a teacher. Mm-hmm. Never wanted to be a teacher. If you had told me when I was 18 that, one day I would move back to Texas and then I would not just be a teacher, but be a teacher like 15 minutes away from when I had grown up, I would have punched you in the face, because I was going to go off and like do these things and be this fancy person. I lived on the East Coast for a long time. I had this entirely other career. I moved back to Texas with the intention of being a book and paper conservator, right? So I thought that I was going to work with medieval manuscripts, and this would just be the culmination of everything that I've ever learned or studied. I love languages. I love history. I love material culture, like all of these things. But meanwhile, I was broke. So I signed up to substitute teach. And when I went to this school, which is a junior high school in the school district where I grew up, they sent me to a home ec class. And I didn't know that home ec still existed. But, great. And the teacher had left an assignment that was to read a chapter and give the kids a homework sheet that she had made by hand, and it was on laundry. So the kids are supposed to do a load of colors and whites at home and then read this chapter. And I hadn't set foot in a school since I was a kid myself, so I thought that it would be kind of educational if I had them read the chapter out loud. And I have such a distinct memory of running to the front office at my break to let them know really breathlessly, like, hey, these kids don't know how to read. Like, were you aware of this? This is these kids are about to go to high school and they can't read. And then there was one kid and she refused to read. And since I didn't know anything about kids, I forced her to in front of the class. And then I realized, like, oh, she doesn't speak English. And I just humiliated her in front of everybody. And, at the end of the day, I had spent the whole day in this classroom surrounded by signs that say, like, don't do drugs, don't get pregnant. And I realized at the end of the day that I had just spent the whole day teaching black and brown kids how to clean. And that elsewhere in the school, there were kids learning about history and writing and science. And I went home that day and was just so upset because, my sister and I had attended schools as bilingual kids ourselves, young Latinx kids in that same school district. And up until that morning, had you asked me, I would have said that I know everything about that school district. And I was so uncomfortable, and I just really didn't understand what are the circumstances that created this classroom. And wow, the kids are not okay. And that was it. I woke up that morning and I thought that my life's work was going to be I'm going to hang out looking at medieval manuscripts. And the next morning, like that, literally, it was one day of substitute teaching for me to realize, like, weirdly, all of the, academic and intellectual pursuits that I've ever been interested in add up to me being really good with middle schoolers and just, like, I just want them to feel at the end of the day, Miss Checka didn't help you clean. Miss Checka read poetry with you and drama, and we express ourselves, and you learn things, and, the world is your oyster, et cetera, et cetera.
You've been teaching for a while now, and I mean, it's no secret kind of that there are issues within the world of education and, teachers not being valued, not being paid enough, resources, all of that. Could you talk to us about your experience as a teacher dealing with these issues in education and kind of just in your experience, how they have been handled, how you as a teacher kind of your version of the story, what ends up happening at the end of the day, because we see all these issues and whether they're solved or not, you're still the one that has to be in the classroom.
Yeah. Whew. Well, you've got...
and I know there's a lot of them, right?
There's a lot.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I mean, my specific context is that I'm a public school teacher and I'm in Texas. So that right there, there's some issues that we're dealing with that hopefully aren't as much of an issue in other parts of the country. At my core, I really am specifically a public school teacher. That's really important to me because I really value the fact that the public school is open to everybody and we serve everyone. And that's the foundation of democracy. The thing is, we're not well funded. So there are political issues that we've been facing for the last couple of years. There are funding issues that we've been facing for the last couple of years. There are, social things that are going on. But I would say, like, at a really, really, really basic level, the school building where you and I have worked at together doesn't have reliable air conditioning. And the state of Texas also doesn't have a reliable electrical grid, So I just, like, if we could get real nuts and bolts here, like, it would be pretty awesome if we
the bar
had
is low.
The HVAC that worked, because I feel like in the public conversation, there's been a lot of talk about, like, teachers paying out of pocket for school supplies and so on and so forth. And without getting too much in the weeds about the state legislature, it is my whole career. It's super, super, super frustrating of, like, we're made to feel as though the fact that we don't have working HVAC or, there's layoffs or closures, whatever, is because of economic reasons, but actually it's not. My state currently has a $30 billion surplus. It's these political contexts that, again, we could do 50 podcasts about that. But the upshot is, like, here we are in a first world country. Here we are in a state that has, like, a big surplus, and also we don't have reliable heating and air conditioning. So that's like, number one. You and I worked together through COVID, and I think globally that was a lot in education. There was a lot of challenges, and we're still seeing some of the, the effects that had on kids' emotional health, mental health, their academic well-being. There's, we've been the political punching bag now for a couple of years. Like, the other really, really specific context that I teach in is I'm an English teacher. And there's really fun book bannings. I just never thought when I started out in my career as an English teacher that one of the things that I would be having to defend is books. Or I guess, like, the opposite way of saying that is that it's truly, truly, truly shocking to me that, like, the American public is having this debate about books, and, like, a big chunk of the debate is that kids just read too much. Just too much. Like, that is mind-boggling to me. So yeah, those are some highlights of some of the issues that we faced.
And in my 3 years of being in public education too, we see kind of a lot of ideas being thrown, a lot of suggestions, and then things that don't happen, a lot of apps, a lot of technology. But at the end of the day, I think we agree, and not just we agree, but we see it, that what is valuable, what works the most is people and the support. You were my mentor and going through the process of my first few years in teaching and being able to talk to you about certain scenarios and how to approach them, and having that dependence to you as a mentor really helped me. And I know with other people on my campus too, like being younger, I knew a little bit more about technology, so we were able to depend on each other. So it goes back to the people. What has been your experience with like all the kind of different curriculums, different apps and websites, and what have you seen works and what doesn't?
I mean, I couldn't have said it better. Like, the app can't believe in you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, the app can't nag you, can't believe in you, can't, connect with you. And, humans are fundamentally social creatures, but children are fundamentally, they are social creatures. And I think it goes both ways of, I'm not a robot. I need human connection as well. And like in moments where I'm being made to feel like I'm the proctor in the room and that there's an app that's doing the teaching, that is very frustrating for the kids, but it's extremely frustrating for me. Like that's not I think like we did kind of a nationwide experiment on what that was like during COVID, and the end conclusion was that kids didn't like it, teachers hated it. So there's that. But I would say like, with the rise of ed tech, to me, there's a pretty big difference. We're still in the wild west of ed tech, and I don't think that we've landed on really how that's going to look and function, in a classroom, and people are still learning. Like a lot of these programs are still written as a digital replacement of something analog rather than something that's kind of natively digital. In other words, like the imagination of somebody who is my age to make something digital is sometimes just to make like an electronic worksheet rather than like, oh, here's this entirely different modality that you could be using. But basically the difference to me of like ed tech that is incorporated and is adding value is ed tech that's written in a way that I can use as a tool and that supplements like the instructions that I'm giving. And ed tech that is not successful is anything that tries to be sort of a teacher replacement, right? And so like programs where I can see in real time, hey, this is, what kind of questions my students are being asked, and this is how they're doing this, and this is who needs help, and et cetera. Like those tend to be good tools to use in a classroom. And programs that are like a closed, opaque box of like, okay, student, like we're going to park you in front of the screen and then you're going to be doing something or other for 20 or 30 minutes or for a unit of time or for a unit of whatever. And at the end, I'm going to get this data on how you did overall, but I have no idea what you're having trouble with, is generally speaking not great. And like you and I teach at a school or have taught in a school that is very much about collaboration, working together, really discussion heavy. And so again, I think that, there's some things that really do lend themselves to be taught digitally, which is fine. Like I think, multiplication tables, you can teach that digitally, you're fine. But other skills like inferencing, reading a poem, I think that it's actually a whole lot more valuable to do that, in a way that lets kids express themselves and learn in community with each other.
Right.
So yeah.
Yeah, and I think like the word that you said, community, I think that's the main point. And in community, again, building the relationships with the students, so we're in community with them, in a community of learning, and then also in community with our peers, our other coworkers, the staff, the administration, that we're all on the same page. I think that's super important. And I think that's a good thing about where we worked, is that everyone was kind of on the same page about, we have teachers obviously wear lots of hats. There's data, there's all these compliance things, but we're all pretty much on the same page of like, is it for the kids? If it's not, then it takes the back seat, So being a student focused, obviously wanting the best for the students, I found myself feeling really frustrated a lot of times with, and I struggled with this a lot, feeling really frustrated sometimes with parents. And I had to really, really kind of learn to, because, we're trying to be there for the students. And sometimes it felt like, which probably wasn't the case, that we were kind of working against each other. And I think that's just because of the system that is set in place that is kind of straightening both ends. If parents are doing their best to take care of their kid and provide, we're trying to do our best to kind of give the children the education that they deserve, but we're being pulled apart in two separate directions, which causes us to collide when we should be kind of working together to try to improve the system, and that way, it's not so heavy. So what would you say to that, and in your experience with that? Because I literally would get really like super frustrated with parents, and I had to remember like no one is out here trying to be a bad parent, like they're trying their best for their child. It's their child. It's not even my child, but I'm like feeling a bit defensive over them, So how did you kind of maneuver that, and how did you kind of work with that?
Well, I mean, one thing I'm going to say is going to frustrate you a lot, which is it gets really significantly better when you get to be closer in age to the parent.
Yeah.
When I was first starting out, I found the reaction that parents had were really gendered and like really, really, really having to do with age. Like you could have a kid who is having, academic issues or behavior issues in multiple classes, and the parents would go straight to whoever was like the youngest woman teacher, and that it's just a thing. Definitely, I think sometimes parents will go towards the younger teacher and, feel like they can maybe interact with them in a way that they wouldn't with somebody who is closer to their own age. And that is just a super, super, super frustrating thing. But I think that it is a true thing.
Oh, yeah. I kind of even experienced it in gender. Like my coworkers were mainly women, and there would be instances where parents would talk to them a certain way, not so respectful. But whenever I would approach them, even though I was the younger one, because I was the guy, I wouldn't get the same kind of response, which is very sad.
It is. Yeah. But, the flip side to that is that teachers kind of add to the problem when we do things like we only contact the mom. Well, why isn't dad getting, phone calls about homework or so on and so forth? And so, it goes both ways of like, we could do a better job of communicating, to both parents, not making the mother always the default kind of parent. And also, man, it just stinks when somebody tells you to not take things personally. Cause like, of course you're going to take things personally, but I do think that there is an element of like, man, don't take that personally when you are the youngest person on the team, because sometimes you're just getting it literally because you're the youngest person on the team. I will say I have had wonderful, wonderful, wonderful parents over the years. And I mean, your parents were amazing. Like there are many, 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 many wonderful parents. And like, it's a sad but true thing that you think that you're like in a just and fair world, your impression emotionally would be like, wow, I have like 99 really, really, really wonderful parents, and like this one person that I'm having a lot of difficulty with. And so like 99% of your emotional impact is like these positive interactions, and it's not, it's the one, right? Yeah. And like, I think one thing that has helped me over the years is just to see a little bit statistically of like, well, just like not all of the kids are going to love you. Like not all the parents are going to love you either. And that it just, the larger and larger groups that you have coming through your classroom, like it's true. Another thing is building up like trust and goodwill with parents is their precious baby. They have no idea. Like maybe you are being awful and unfair. Like maybe you are, the wicked witch of the West. Like building up some trust with the parents that, hey, I'm trying to work with you, and like I just want what's best for your kid, and like in my universe, like what's best for your kid is being able to like read and write. Yeah. What is frustrating to me personally is I do wish that I had more credibility with parents going in, you know, because I feel like there are lots and lots of situations where I kind of want to say to the parent, like, between the middle-aged lady who is the English teacher and like your middle school age child, I feel like I could maybe be given the benefit of the doubt on, no, ma'am, I really did give this assignment with all of the instructions several days ago. Right. And your kid, who is the chronic procrastinator, maybe is not telling you the entire full picture. You know, that's a little bit frustrating of like, it's between you and the 13-year-old. And, you know, at the same time, I can see, hey, it's good that parents believe their kids, but, you know, it's more helpful when parents believe their kids, but also know their kids.
Right. Yeah.
You know, like if your kid always weasels out of doing their chores, then it's not that shocking that they do the same thing at school.
Right.
You know, they don't become different people at school and from home.
Well, and then sometimes they do, like, because they're like, oh, my sweet baby angel, he would never. And I think that's more with the behavioral stuff, which is this last year. This is what I had to deal with, because this last year I was a restorative practices coach, which is kind of a rebrand of the in-school suspension. So I dealt a lot with like discipline and behavior, and I got a lot of that of, my baby sweet angel, like never. And
Fair
I'm
enough.
like, if you only see them at school, you know, they are kind of a different person sometimes. But I think you're right. Like you said, like we're all, at the end of the day, we all are on the same page. Like we want what's best for the children. So again, with your experiences with school in the classroom, and I know you mentioned to me before that you have gone down to Austin and talked to legislature about all these, school education policy. What do you think is the kind of biggest bang for your buck kind of thing that people can do to improve the state of education, either in Texas or in the country overall? What do you think people can do?
Vote. I mean, there's not even a close second of, I feel so often that people want to like bake sale their way into like better public education. But, you know, a lot of these things that are systemic things, like there is a political movement that is organized and accomplishing things. And then there's, so when people don't like something, like they organize and they do something, like the book bannings, like the funding. And when people do like something, and statistically in the United States, like parent satisfaction rates with their local schools it's quite high. Right? It's like, and you find it anecdotally. If you ask somebody about like, oh, public schools in America, you know, they'll say this, that, and the other. But then you ask them about like, how about your kids' elementary school? Oh, yes. You know, I really love Mrs. So-and-so, and like we do, right? So like, one, understand that like when, you know, these attacks are to the public school system, they mean your kid's school. Right? They mean your kid's first grade teacher that they love so much, and like the principal who is exhausting themselves, you know, trying to put together the carnivals or whatever. And I think that, you know, this really, when I say vote, I don't even mean in a partisan way, but if your kid's schooling is important to you, and if you as an educator yourself, like what we do is meaningful and important to you, like you got to vote. You know, like you have to say out loud, you know, via text message or calling an office or whatever, and say like, hey, it's very important to me that, you know, the schools in my town, city, whatever, you know, have the resources they need. You don't have to be an expert in the legislation. You don't have to be stuff, but just saying this is important to me. And when you are going to the ballot box, like your local paper prints out a thing and it has the platforms, how does that person support public education, yes or no? And like vote accordingly. Because I think that there are lots and lots and lots of partisan issues where you could go down to the mat and just never see eye to eye on really core fundamental things. But I feel like, do you want kids in your town to be able to read and write and have like a positive experience at school? can and should be something where even people who disagree in a lot of other areas, like we want things to be better for our kids than they were for us, you know. So I would say vote.
Yes.
Vote deliberately, vote intentionally, and make your wishes known.
Yeah. And I think it's important how you pointed out, because I'm on the same page with you about public education. You know, this podcast, we ask the question and answer the question, how are the children? And whenever I ask that question, I mean, how are all children? You know, not just how are the wealthy children, not just how are the children in this part of town, how are all the children? And the thing about public education is that they serve all children, they accept all children, and they have a publicly elected school board, right? So they are bound to these rules where they are supposed to and need to serve all children of all different backgrounds, learning abilities, and all of that. So specifically, that's why we highlight public schools and supporting them and legislators who support public schools. So thank you so much, Ale, for joining me on this conversation. And it was so good to talk to you. And it's always good to chat and just reminisce also on how long we've known each other.
Anytime. I'm so proud of you. And I'm like, you did such a phenomenal job, both like as a teacher and restorative justice practices. I think you're downplaying when you call it like a rebrand. Like, you had a huge impact at our school in like helping kids feel heard and like helping kids negotiate, you know, this really tangled web of
middle school and the feeling, all the feelings. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes. All right. Well, thank you so much, Ale, again. And also a big thank you to those of you who have joined us in this conversation and have been listening. I hope this conversation between Ale and I has given you some insight into what it's really like in the world of education. And I hope you continue to support your teachers, your administrators, public education, and also yourselves so that we can continue to depend on each other and support each other and be able to show up where our children need us.